What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Now I know that the description as well as the thumbnail of this video could be considered clickbaity, but it is something that I take super serious and I stand by since I've tried every single Descendant in the First Descendant except one, Eugen, and I can comfortably say that nothing comes close to the power that Hailey can push out. Now, I'm sure if you consume any form of social media around the First Descendant, you've been inundated by clips over this weekend of Hailey essentially completely and utterly destroying Void bosses. You have 5-second pyro kills, 12-second swamp walker kills, 10-second executioner kills, and this is true as a character that uses her fourth ability and that thereby uses skill damage to kill enemies. She is in a league of her own. The ability to push out huge damage numbers is insane with Hailey and super satisfying whether you are playing solo or whether you are playing in a group. But the other thing that people don't seem to realize is that Hailey is also pretty much like a very juiced up Enzo and can also do shit like this. And just simply using a very similar setup to what you would build into an Enzo or a Valby with supply moisture, you can essentially use the Enduring Legacy or whichever gun you have that basically just pushes out a huge amount of damage and rounds to decimate these Void Intercept bosses as well as do some really efficient mobbing. While Hailey is also super tough and pretty much impossible to kill, which then also makes her the best gun Descendant in the game right now. And the cool thing is that you can build both of these without having to swap polarities or anything like that, and I'm going to show you exactly how. So first things first, and starting us off, let's just go ahead and discuss her abilities quickly, because both these builds that I'm going to show you, it is important that you understand the significance of what these abilities do. So if we just go to her kit over here, we have our 4 abilities. The first one being Cryo Round. Essentially, this is a little shoulder cannon that shoots out targets in front of you. This is a very important ability because basically what it does is it applies cryo, and it's one of the 2 abilities that she has that applies this debuff to enemies. Now, this debuff is super important because what it does is it elevates your damage, and you can clearly see it there where it says additional damage based on, you know, the stacks that are on the enemy. Now, this also has a duration, so it's important that when you hit stuff that it basically you know capitalize on that duration and get it done. Next, we have Storm Snare, which is another ability that applies cryo, but also is one of her, if not the hardest hitting ability, because it has such a massive amount of skill power. Now, this ability is essentially really good at applying a huge amount of this cryo-based damage. As soon as you essentially, you know, put cryo rounds onto an enemy, you hit them with the Storm Snare, and then you finish them off with Zenith, which is the 4th ability, which is basically her snipes. But in many cases with many of the Void Intercept bosses, that entire scenario is massive overkill, especially if you're playing solo, because you're dealing so much damage that you don't really need to even do this rotation. But again, the point is that when we are talking about a rotation and quickly deviating it, the point is that if you want to juice out the maximum amount of damage, or let's rather say one of the ways that you can juice out the maximum amount of damage, is you hit him with the cryo rounds, which get some cryo stacks on them. You hit him with the Storm Snare, and now they're basically downed or something like that, and then you just hit him with a bunch of Zenith shots, and Bob's your uncle. Now, all of this only works because of her 3rd, and her 3rd is really where it gets very sexy. Cold Fury is essentially an ability that you activate, and this then over time, over 16 seconds, builds up your critical as well as your critical damage as well as your critical chance. And so I will just quickly demonstrate this to you here, where you can look at my character and you'll see that currently at this point in time, my skill critical hit rate is 11% and my skill critical hit damage is 4.7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate this ability now, and we're just going to go back in here and we're going to see how this basically goes up. Now you can see we're going to hit max, and boom, now we have both of these juiced up. And now our shots, as long as this is available and is spraying us with this ice, you're going to be dealing this huge amount of additional damage. Now, I mentioned before that there are 2 builds. The first one is exactly this build where you essentially snipe Void Intercept bosses with your 4th ability, and this is essentially your build that you're going to use to solo farm Void Intercept bosses or in a group get those insane kills on the bosses while basically helping out by shooting from the back. Now, this is this over 9,000 here, and these are the mods over here, so I will just go ahead and explain the choices for some of these. But as a general guideline, the point is you want to be stacking as much crit chance up to a threshold, which I'll explain what that threshold is. You want as much critical damage, and then you also want to be basically stacking as much skill power. Now, skill power modifier is not very important on Hailey, and that's because you can see that all of her abilities have insane amounts of skill power basically baked into them. So here you have almost 9k, and then over here you have basically 3.6k. So you want to be elevating that as much as possible. So you want to be targeting mods that give you additional skill power. So if you look over here, chill skill power is really good off of Glacial. Then of course we have some additional skill power of Spear and Shield. And then we have some additional skill power over here, another chill skill power from Chill Specialist. Now we also use Dangerous Ambush because the point is a lot of the times you are going to hit a Void Intercept boss with Storm Snare, and that Storm Snare is going to drop the boss into a down state, and then you can capitalize from this additional that you get from Dangerous Ambush by using them for your snipes. The rest of the ones basically make a lot of sense here because we use front lines and we use emergency measures because both of those give us crit damage as well as crit hit rate. And it is important that you have a certain base level of crit so that you can be sure that 16 seconds of this Cold Fury gets you to max. You don't want to be getting to 90, you don't want to be getting to 95, anything like that. You want to be getting to max because that is how you ensure that you're dealing the most damage. 100% doesn't mean that you're going to be critting 100% of the time. Your Void Intercept bosses also have crit resistances, so you want to be getting as close to that 100% so that you can capitalize on hitting as many crits as possible and that you close that interval of getting resisted for crits. Now, what is that threshold? For me personally, the sweet spot I found in two different places. First of all, let's just go back here again and let's look. So for me, the sweet spot is at around about 11%. I think you can go a little bit lower. I think you can be at about 9%, but the point is you want to get close to 10. When you add 10%, 16 seconds of the Storm Snare buff will basically get you to max, as you saw before when I was doing that for you, and that's going to be enough for you to essentially max that out. Now, the rest of the ones here are just two defensive mods. I use increased defense and increased HP. You could use whichever other defensive mods you want to slap in here. If you, I don't know, for some reason want to run shield or whatever, then, you know, Bob's your uncle. But you do want to have a little bit of survivability because the point is oftentimes the bosses will hit you with AoEs or shoot shit around you that set you on fire or poison you and stuff like that. And you might sometimes be kneeling in this poison and fire to take your snipe shots at the boss. So you want to be able to capitalize on all of your shots and get those shots out and not die to a fucking dot that's on the ground. So a little bit of survivability and not full glass cannon is absolutely the way to go here. Now you can see I only use skill concentration to give me the critical hit damage. There's no skill insight here, and that's because I have enough crit chance on my character due to the fact that I have a reactor that gives me critical hit rate. We're going to talk about this more when we get to the reactor, but the point is if you are lacking crit hit and you already have front lines, emergency measures, and skill concentration, you're going to have to sacrifice one of these mods to put insight on. So over here, you'll be able to get a huge amount of additional crit hit rate from skill insight. And so therefore, if you can't get close to that 10% for some reason, then this is where you're going to have to come and find it. Then last but certainly not least, we have Spear and Shield, as I've already mentioned, which gives you the skill power, but this also gives you a little bit of defense, a little bit more survivability. And then of course we have Shot Focus. Shot Focus gives you 15% additional firearm attack, which is good. Firearm attack is a very, very important stat for Hailey because it basically everything that comes from your weapon translates into raw DPS for her and is additional damage. So you want to be stacking this as much as possible. And the penalty here, meaning that it reduces your skill power modifier by 15%, doesn't matter because we're not worried about skill power modifier. We're only worried about skill power. Now for this build, your weapon of choice is Piercing Light. Now, I will say it's super important that whichever weapon you're using should be matching your reactor and should be mounted on your reactor. Guys, we're going to look at the reactor just now, so just bear with me. But you basically be sure that you have that combo going because the extra 60% that you can get from matching your reactor to a mounted weapon is huge, and that's going to give us much more skill power, aka much more damage. Failing that, if you have to use a purple reactor, then that's also fine, but you are going to be missing about 20% of that top end. Now, this is by far not a fully optimized piercing light, but all of the footage that you saw playing so far in the video was done with this weapon exactly like this. This can be improved by quite a bit. But basically, the reason why we use piercing light is it's super important that you use a high base damage or base DPS weapon. So you can see the base DPS is right over here. The firearm attack rather, so not base DPS, but rather the firearm attack. You can see it's 193k. Now you can see all weapons have a base value there. And this is super important because the snipes, this over here, right, is based on the base damage is the same as the equipped weapon. So you want to be using the highest one. Now you can check every single weapon in the game. Piercing light is the highest one. It's just the one that produces the most damage. If they release a weapon down the line that has a higher firearm attack than piercing light, then that weapon will most likely be best in slot for Hailey, because this base firearm attack value is super important in, you know, getting your DPS to a certain level. Now we want to be stacking the piercing light with all the things that can actually matter for you when you are doing snipes. Certain mods don't work and some do. These mods that I have over here is probably your best selection of mods which actually carry their let's say values over into the shots with Hailey's weapon. So there are certain things which obviously don't matter on a sniper rifle, like you don't care about things like fire rate. Elemental rate on the weapon does not work. It does not elevate her damage with her zenith snipes, so it doesn't help like putting more fire damage on this or anything like that. But what absolutely is super important is bringing more crit damage, and then as much weak point damage as you can, because you will be sniping those weak points. So super important to do that. The usual staples here: action, reaction, rifling, reinforcement. And then the other thing that is important is by default you get 4 shots with zenith, but you can give yourself more shots, all the way up to 8, so double the amount of shots that you would usually get by stacking rounds per magazine mods. Now there are 2 in the game that you can put onto your sniper rifle. So as I said, this right here is the unoptimized version right now. Lastly, before I show you the 3 mods that I'll be putting into this when I'm finished with this build, is obviously just weak point sight and weak point expansion is super important for us here, because that's just going to give us a lot more weak point damage. All right, now let me just say quickly here, the 3 mods that I would be adding in here is I would be putting concentration priority onto this as well, which gives us more critical hit damage. Again, critical hit damage, super important stat for us. Then we, as I mentioned, we want to get more rounds in, so I will be putting in, I think it's concentration, concentrate support ammo. This one I'll be putting on as well, because this gives you again more rounds per magazine. That'll get us to the 8 shots, but also gives a little bit more firearm critical hit damage, which is very sexy. And then last but not least, there's one more bad boy that I'd be putting on here, and that is focus fire. Focus fire gives you even more weak point damage, another 20%, and even just a little bit more critical hit damage. So with those 3 mods on, that would be the complete piercing light. That would be your whole weapons delivery package, and essentially the best stat stick for Hailey in the game right now. And one other change that I do want to mention, of course, we always have some choices when it comes to your ultimate mod. So I've tested strength and first shot with this. It makes no difference, or at the very, I don't know if it's bugged and it's supposed to be working but it's not working or something like that. I think it has something to do with the fact that when you activate zenith, the game does not see that as a reload effect, and so therefore it doesn't count. It also doesn't work if you actually reload your piercing light and then activate zenith. It still does not trigger the strength and first shot, so therefore this is dead. This would be fucking busted if it actually did work though, and I'm hoping that there's maybe something wrong with the interaction and that it actually does work and they, you know, fix it down the line, because it'll be cute to, at least for the memes, right, to get those insane snipes, maybe one tap a boss or something like that. Other than that, yeah, I mean, dopaminergic activate is good if you need the additional crit hit and crit hit damage, but overall I feel like it's outweighed by the 140% additional weak point damage that you get from something like weak point expansion. Now, I do also want to mention the fact that weak point expansion is generally, I mean, this is more good for if you're like solo and you basically just want to be pulling off these meme kills and everything like that. If you are playing in a party, special sight is really good for you, because while it does have a slight penalty there, the weak point damage is consistent, whereas if you are using weak point expansion, you get this every 10 seconds, right? But the point is, because you are solo, the Void Intercept bosses, their HP is so low that you don't need to worry about this being refreshed multiple times, because it's going to be one rotation of your fucking, you know, abilities and the boss is going to be on the floor. Whereas, you know, some of the later boss fights, the later Void Intercepts, the ones where you are in parties of 4, can drag on a little bit, and so therefore over time this is just going to actually mean more for you in terms of like being consistent. And that's pretty much it. You could just run special sight straight off the... Did I just say special shite? You can run special sight straight off the rip and don't even work with weak point expansion. And you're not going to have those insane, you know, big, you know, hits. But it is going to be super, super consistent and actually works just fine. Again, when you're playing solo, the boss's HPs are way lower. And so therefore, you are just overpowering them with your raw damage by default. On your piercing light, you want firearm attack, critical hit rate, weak point damage, and critical hit damage. You could potentially replace either the hit rate or the hit damage with something like damage to Colossus. That is also really good. You could maybe even replace the weak point damage with that. Maybe that's even the better choice. To be fair, I was just super happy once I got this critical hit damage to roll, because I was getting a whole bunch of bullshit, and so I even just took the blue. Of course, this can be a lot better, and this can, you know, go up to like a gold critical hit damage, which will just make the gun even sexier. So finally then we get to the reactor, of course, and basically what you're looking for is a frozen singularity reactor. So let me just quickly move my face over to this side. You're looking for a frozen singularity reactor because this has chill skill power boost and it has singular power boost ratio. And of course this is important because this is a singular ability, as well as this bad boy over here, Storm Snare. So your two main bread and butter ways in which you're dealing damage with this snipe build, with this boss killer build, are both singular, and that's why it's super important. Now for your substats, by far, especially because this is a Void Intercept killing build, by far your best bet is something like Colossus damage, additional Colossus damage, and critical hit damage. That is your best in slot, and that is going to produce the biggest numbers and the biggest, you know, shots. And that is the one that you should be looking for. However, like, I'm using critical hit rate here and critical hit damage, and what that actually does for me is, as I mentioned before, that allows me to not have to put skill insight here, because this gets me to the 11% crit that I need so that I can start pushing up with Cold Fury and get to the max. So like, for example, it is possible, I don't have a reactor like that, so I haven't done the testing yet or something like that, but in testing with some other reactors just to run the numbers, it seems that then basically if I do get the best in slot, which is Colossus and crit hit damage, then I would basically go over here to my character, and I would most likely take something like increased defense out and slap a skill insight in there, and then that will still even out and basically give me exactly the same you know, loadout as I have here, albeit I'll be a little bit less, you know, tough. I'll be a little bit more squishy, a little bit more glass cannony, but then again, who cares, because if the enemy's fucking dead and on the ground, they're not going to deal damage to you. So yeah, YOLO. So then when it comes to your external components for the boss killer build, Slayer is 4-piece Slayer is by far the best, because you're just getting 26% additional skill power. This shit is too good to not. Now there's no other set that basically comes close to this, again, in terms of, you know, helping you deal as much damage as possible, since that is really the objective of this particular build. Your substats on the reactors obviously try and get as much survivability as possible, get defense, get resistances and things like that, so that you can just stay in the AoEs and whatever a little bit longer. Lastly, I just want to mention that, of course, if anybody's looking at these values here, just bear in mind that these are not the final values of the build, because I'm only level 13 here, and I was busy doing the last module and essentially leveling up when I started recording this footage. So these numbers will go up, defense will go up, mana will go up, HP will go up, so all of those will go up, because you get a little bit of that every time when you level up, so you'll be a little bit more tough by the time you hit 40. Then moving on to something which I actually enjoy a lot with this character is her full gun-based build, which is just ridiculous the way that it fries. It's really fun to play in groups, especially alongside other gun characters. Like, yeah, you're not going to be benefiting all that much from someone like Enzo or so on, because basically you're already running at full crit damage, all of that. But the point is, the Enzo is going to fry, you are going to fry, and you're basically just going to tear through enemies with your weapon of choice. Now, I do want to mention that that weapon of choice should probably be Enduring Legacy, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more after we dive into the skills. Now, just moving me over here again, the point is I'm not going to go through all the abilities again, but the main thing that you have to bear in mind with this build is the only thing you really care about is Cold Fury. You want your Cold Fury to basically be the thing that boosts up your critical hit chance and your critical hit damage, and once you get max stacks on this, your gun's just going to be fucking absolutely destroying stuff and essentially turning it inside out. Now, the thing that you have to bear in mind with that ability, sorry, I just go back there again quickly, is this has a MP cost per second, and so it drains over time. And when you saw me doing this before, you saw that MP cost essentially hitting my mana bar and going down. And it's super important that you finish your combo before this runs out, because as soon as Cold Fury stops, then that buff falls off, and then basically you're not critting as much. So the first objective for you to make a gun-based build for Hailey is that you have to make Cold Fury like essentially have 100% uptime. It has to be self-sustaining and that it can't ever go down. And you can achieve that. So just to show you here quickly, if I just replenish myself 1 second. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate this. And now you're going to see that my bar at the bottom there basically stays full. So this doesn't deplete at all, which means once we hit 16 stacks on this, we're going to go here, boom, boom. And we're going to see now our firearm crit hit rate is 100% and our crit hit damage multiplier is 8.3. And now you just absolutely got to fucking annihilate shit. This is going to hit like a Mack truck. It's going to tear through stuff. It's just super, super sexy and very, very satisfying. And so you can just move around and you'll see it'll drain a little bit, but also bear in mind I'm level 14 right now, so the MP bar is not as big as it could be, so it will definitely last you for the entire fight. And of course, as you know, if you kill little enemies and stuff along the way, if you're mobbing, you're getting mana drops. If you are fighting a Void Intercept boss, you can kill some of his minions and those will drop mana as well, and you can basically pick that up and, you know, go. So firstly, let's talk about the Descendant module. I will show you the Enduring Legacy build I have as well, but that's, you know, pretty much, I would say, fairly straightforward. And I actually have a video just on Enduring Legacy on the channel if you want to check it out, so I'm not going to be spending too much time on that. This video is long enough as it is, I think. But when it comes to the Descendant modules, basically here what you're going to be doing is you're just going to be building for toughness. There aren't a lot of mods that you can put onto Hailey that is going to help you with damage with this particular setup, because the point is the gun is the star of the build. You're not worrying about skill power, you're not worrying about things like fucking skill crit rate and crit damage, whatever, because you're not damaging them with skills. Your gun is the fucking star, so you can concentrate on using all of your mods to essentially increase your toughness, as well as create this situation where you are self-sustaining with your MP bar and where you can just stay inside this Cold Fury indefinitely. So you can do this first of all by giving yourself energy collection over here. This increases your MP recovery by a percentage, and that's one of the ways that you do this. You also use some and then the other thing is you need to drop the cost. When you do both of these things, when you give yourself more MP regen and you reduce the cost, you reach like a break point where these two things get very close to one another, and that's where you essentially have infinite. So you'll notice here that my MP cost, this starts out at 12 seconds, but 12 seconds, sorry, 12 MP, but we've reduced it to 5.5, right? And then the continuous MP cost, instead of being 10 in a 1 second, it's 4.6 in 1 second, and that's why we are so efficient. So again, strong mentality gives us less skill cost, maximum conservation gives us less skill cost, and then here we go, weighing the scales also gives us slightly less skill cost. Then again, like I said, energy collection gives us that MP recovery, and then we can just slap shot focus in there as well, because you know what, let's get that extra 15% firearm attack, and then we just give ourselves some survivability, increase HP, increase defense, MP collector on here if you want to always stay topped off. but it's not necessary with this build. What I found to actually be better is actually HP collector. Now I can't put HP collector in here right now because I need to just optimize this a little bit more so that I get more space. But as you can see, this is essentially using exactly the same setup as I have over here in over 9000, which is the boss killing build, but I haven't changed any polarities or anything like that. This is pretty much just allowing me to run the same build but then use these mods. So you can see it's unoptimized. We can spend 1 or 2 more catalysts on here and then change these ones over as well, which will optimize it even further. And then, for instance, let us bring in something like HP collector as well as a final mod into here, just giving us more, you know, survivability. Like you can make yourself immune to frostbite or make yourself immune to toxic, or you know, anything like that. The sky's the limit. There are a lot of different choices, but all in all, this is already just going to make you like super tough. You can see here that I'm only level 13 right now, but we have a very respectable defense at 21k already, and we have like 8k of HP and like almost 1000 shield, which is pretty tough. And you can, you know, take some hits, and once we get to level 14, you're going to be a little bit tougher even. So then, just looking at the Enduring Legacy quickly over here, and let's just go back here. This, I would say, is a very optimized Enduring Legacy, and basically it's got all the accoutrement that you usually have on a weapon like this. So you've got the staples, rifling reinforcement, rate up, action and reaction, some additional magazine charge over there. We've got crit damage and crit hit. We've got more crit damage over here. We've got more crit hit over there. We give ourselves fire enhancement because fire enhancement on Enduring Legacy is really good. Go watch the video if you need me to explain why. And then sharp precision shot for that fucking spin up, and just basically the longer you hold down the mouse button and fucking shoot into the enemy, the faster you're going to deliver your payload and your entire DPS package onto the boss. Now, Reactor doesn't matter at all for this build, which is the cool thing about this. That's why this is in a way slightly easier to build than looking for the perfect mounted piercing light reactor on the boss killing one. So this is basically, you can use any reactor on here. I would say that the only one that might even be funky to test on here would be a reactor that has a substat for skill cost that will drop your if, for example, you don't have other ways and you still find yourself dealing with an issue where your MP depletes to the point where you can't, you know, use it, then you can use something like a reactor with skill cost on it, which will basically reduce your skill cost even more, and then basically reduce your skill cost of Cold Fury. Now, this has been running the entire time, by the way, guys. So the entire time that I've been going off here and flapping my mouth, we've been with this buff going. So this is, again, just showing you just how effective this is. Our external components here, I basically just went for survivability. So I've got 2 pieces of Slayer and 2 pieces of Annihilation. The point is, I just wanted to have as much defense, as much resistance, as much HP as possible. So you can see the substats on these components is really where you know, the yum comes from. And there you have my 2 builds for Hailey that I use right now. Both of them are exceptionally good at pretty much trivializing any piece of content in the game right now. Very excited to see where they take us with the new boss, the new Void Intercept boss that is coming in October, and we'll see how much of a challenge that presents us with. But both of these builds will fry pretty much any content that you put in front of it, especially as it starts, you know, becoming more mainstream now, and we get more people. Very much the same, you know, situation that we saw with Lepic, where more people started playing, you know, skill power Lepic, overkill arm Lepic. And so then you would have situations where you would show up into a Void Intercept boss with like 3 fucking Lepics, and just, you know, hilarity will ensue. The same thing is true for this. If you show up to a Void Intercept boss and there's another competent Hailey in there that's sniping or doing the other shit that I do with the Enduring Legacy, you are going to be just fucking flying right to that boss on your way to the loot. But other than that, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next video, fucking cheers.